I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, a U.S. State Department report blaming Israeli settlements as the cause for a lack of peace in the Middle East, and a House report that the Palestinian Authority is using U.S. funding to support convicted Palestinian terrorists and their families, and a French initiative seeking to revive the two-state solution by meeting with Mahmoud Abbas in Paris, and on it goes. This is not a tranquil time, either for the state of Israel, or for the Jewish people. And so for some overall perspective to where many things stand today in the Jewish world, we turn to a man who's at the heart of it all, Malcolm Hoenlein, Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, and a guy who is doing extraordinary work on behalf of world Jewry in the State of Israel. Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us once again.
As always, it's my pleasure to be with you and the opportunity to speak to your many viewers.
Thank you. So, Malcolm, of all that's going on in the Jewish world today, I said to myself, I wonder what's grabbing Malcolm's attention most. What's grabbing your attention today more than anything else?
How many hours do we have? Because I will tell you, I was just making up a list this morning of the things that right now we're addressing, and I gave it to someone, just the myriad of issues. Take the United Nations, where we're fighting against the UNESCO and the renewal of the UNESCO resolution, that meeting that took place in Ankara, where they want to deal with the old city and its walls and removing all the Jewish and Christian names from the holy sites and changing the status of Jerusalem. In toto, we have the election of a Secretary General. We have the upcoming General Assembly session. We have things that we're doing in terms of whether there will be a resolution on the Middle East, or they'll push for a settlements resolution. That's just the United Nations, and that doesn't include the Human Rights Council and the activities in Geneva, et cetera. Obviously, the Washington issues, the memo of understanding, which is at a critical stage, and the continuation of the 10-year plan and what it will contain, which is obviously of great importance to Israel, strengthening U.S.-Israel relations, bringing focus to the fact that Marines and IDF are today engaged in very extensive exercises in Haifa, something that never gets coverage because the press is not interested in good news. We're preparing for the new campus season and dealing with the anti-Israel and the delegitimization activities. We're looking at new ways and new approaches for addressing it. Now, our Lawfare project has been engaged in all sorts of legal efforts. We are working on new trips for high influentials and opinion molders from Hollywood, from elsewhere, going to Israel. We're obviously looking at the follow-up in Turkey and the latest developments in Syria, including new revelations of Iranian activity and possibility of a Russian-Iranian deal, the developments in Gaza, and the elections that will take place in the West Bank and Gaza, with Hamas now competing, which could be very disruptive in terms of the future course of events. We are obviously dealing with the new approaches to Africa, and as I mentioned once before, the Mediterranean initiative, trying to broaden Israel's connections, the outreach, the relationships with countries that are now coming back into the fold, looking for opportunities to relate to Israel and to one another, trying to counter the explosive climate in the Middle East by coming up with positive alternatives. The situation in Europe and obviously the conditions of the Jewish community are of great concern, and security here in the United States as we come to the high holidays and the elections and other things that could be occasion activities or might be exploited by terrorist groups, many of them who might want to use it. That's just an introduction to the agenda of what we're dealing with right now.
It is exhausting, Malcolm. People who are involved in many activities think that their desk is overflowing, that their lives are overwhelming. When you describe the issues that you and the people you work with have to be addressing, and if you don't address them, any one of them can mushroom into something really terrible. I don't know how you do it. But, Malcolm, I still asked you, of all the things that you mentioned, Is there one or two which somehow do absorb most of your attention? Are you paying attention to any of those first?
Look, we always pay attention to security and concerns, but when you get to the bottom line in the Middle East and here, it comes back to Iran. Iran is the critical issue, and when we see these efforts to kosher Iran, that Iran is demanding more from the United States, the statements that Khamenei has made, really negative and terrible statements about the United States and its relationship, saying that they've gotten nothing and that talking to the United States is poison. I mean, so many things that he said that I think people should pay attention, because when dictators make assertions like that, you have to take it seriously. As we see in presidential races and other things here, not everything everybody says is taken seriously. Khamenei means it, and we see the expansion of his support for terrorist activities. We see new thrusts that are of great concern, and what some sort of an arrangement in Syria might look like in its implications for Israel and the region. So I would say now, given the missile tests, given the increased funding for terrorism and other things, Iran still remains a primary concern. Obviously, we're very concerned about domestic issues, about the next generation, educating safety and all of that.
Let's stay there, though.
Iran.
Let's stay with Iran for one moment. And we just had a conversation with somebody at the Washington Institute, and we asked them, it was all about the Iran deal 10 years, a year later, and we basically said to them, how's it going? And Malcolm, the response I got was, well, look, no one really took it seriously. Maybe we've delayed Iran's getting nuclear weapons for 10 years, but we really didn't expect much, and we don't expect much. And I was saying to myself, that wasn't the tone of those who were supporting the Iran deal a year ago. And I want to know from you, as you look at it a year later, and you were one of those who was really trying to encourage us to oppose the Iran nuclear deal. And then there were many in the Jewish community who said that we had to come behind it, that it was better than nothing, and that we lost the ability to reimpose sanctions, and therefore this was the best of all the negative alternatives. But that the President of the United States went on television, including here JBS, saying that this deal would prevent Iran from ever getting a nuclear weapon. Now I'm hearing people say all the time, oh, no, nobody thought that was serious. I'm asking you, as you look now at the deal, especially Malcolm, in light of the Ben Rhodes admission that within the administration, they knew they were in many ways pulling the wool over the American people's eyes. What do you feel about it now?
As we mark the first anniversary, was an opportunity for a lot of retrospection about both what happened and what has happened since. I remind everyone that the vote in the Senate was 58-42 against it. So it wasn't that the bill was passed by Congress. The president pulled a maneuver and successfully got it to the point where the bill was enacted and the process began. Iran has not benefited that much, and they're complaining all the time that they haven't gotten what they wanted, but they got enough that they could be signing deals with Airbus, with Boeing, with many other companies, and there are no restrictions, that they can shoot 4 times ballistic missiles, and no consequence, even though it's a clear violation, if not of the JCPOA, certainly of the UN resolutions, clear violation, and no consequence, that they continue to crack down domestically. And an election is coming up there, by the way, very shortly, and we're going to see then the competition and the pressure. They're always going to say, well, it's the hardliners, and we have to make more concessions. When Rouhani and Zarif are hardliners, there are more executions under Rouhani than there were under Ahmadinejad. Thousands of people have been killed for nothing but being in the political opposition or targeted. And we've seen the domestic crackdown, the increased activity in Iraq and extending it. So it's not just the nuclear program. It is the total activity. Their undermining of the government of Saudi Arabia, of the UAE, against Egypt, against others, and their activities in South America increasing, and especially in Africa, where every leader we meet talks to us about of Iran's nefarious activities. So to go back to the nuclear deal, we understood its implications, that the Iranians are committed, they're hell-bent on getting a nuclear program underway, and now we saw not just Ben Rhodes' comments, but the AP story leaking a document,
yes,
which we're told then was not leaked, and yet the Iranians are complaining and filing a complaint with the IAEA for the leaking of a secret document that they were promised would remain secret, that says that by the 10th year they can start already the process, and they are introducing centrifuges that they say are 15 times more efficient and faster, meaning that they will be able to produce a nuclear weapon, even with reduced amounts of enriched uranium, at a much faster speed. So it's the constant erosion of the conditions and the fact that Iran perceives itself as being free to do what it wants, to harass our soldiers, to violate the agreements, to continue the support, the global terrorism support that they are engaged in, the leading state sponsor of terror. It's the total picture, and yet still tens of billions of dollars are coming to them, and they have increased the output of oil. They just raised yesterday the output of gas. So Iran will have more and more money to do things. The money is not going to the people. They're complaining. There's a huge scandal about the salaries. There's supposed to be a cap of $2,353 a month, and they used this against Ahmadinejad. And now we found that Rouhani did the same thing. They appointed their own cronies and paid them exaggerated salaries, so it's causing a reaction on the streets and amongst the people in Iran. They don't see the benefits of the deal, and now the Iranians are blaming the U.S. for that, rather than saying, what did you do with the money? Why are you spending tens and tens of billions of dollars buying planes that can be used to ferry equipment to Syria? Why are you continuing to invest in Syria, Iraq, the war in Yemen, elsewhere, rather than putting the money into the people of Iran?
Mm-hmm. Bowie, the picture you paint is very bleak. None of us know where it's going, but there's much reason to feel concern, and to feel that in some way we have been let down, and we'll see where it goes. All right, turn to France and this French attempt to restart the peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. And Secretary of State Kerry was in Paris, and he was meeting with Mahmoud Abbas. And we hear Israel is not happy about any of this. What's your sense of it all?
I think it's a French play for domestic political purposes. They have a 20% Muslim population, 15%. There's an election coming up. This is an effort to be relevant on the part of Hollande, the president of France. I can tell you other French officials I have spoken to are not for it. I don't think the United States is for it. I think Secretary Kerry has done a good job trying to delimit it. I think it may end up with a meeting of the professionals, a ministerial level meeting, and they want to try and get a meeting by the end of the year with the Palestinians and Israelis. I do not believe Israel will participate. I don't think the United States will. So I don't believe the French initiative is going to go very far. I do think that there's a possibility that we will see a maneuver at the United Nations, that some of the Arab states might bring forward a resolution at the Security Council, not creating a Palestinian state, but focusing, let's say, on settlements, using language that the United States or others have used, and try to pass something of that kind. And then we may see, after the November elections, maybe a speech, maybe some sort of a statement, a declaration. I don't think the United States wants to see this go to the Security Council, where they know the dangers are unlimited and the potential to do something disastrous for Middle East peace could happen. You're never going to promote peace unless it comes from the parties, and we see that Abbas simply does not want it. And he admitted now, clearly, absolutely, that he walked away from the 2008 agreement, and which has always been disputed. Who did it? He himself said, I walked away. I didn't have a map. I didn't know what to do. All sorts of excuses, as always. And he does not want to negotiate now, and especially facing Fatah, Hamas rivalry in an election, it will be even less likely that he'll do anything.
Mm-hmm. Does that mean that the two-state solution is dead?
No, it's not dead. And I don't know, people, I know on your programs, everybody disputes 1 state, 3 states, 5 states. Right now, there's only one resolution that anybody has supported, Prime Minister, President, anybody. I've not seen people come up with alternative suggestions. There are variations on the theme. The question of what what will be the status of both entities. Those are the things you negotiate, and you reach an understanding, but it has to be between the parties, because you know that many of the predictions about the demographic onslaughts and other stuff that people say were, against a time deadline, and others have shown now that the birth rate is actually of the Jews has gone up and the Arabs has gone down, and that we don't face that kind of timetable, that the expansion is going to ruin the chances, and others show that it doesn't. It's all basically within the territory that will remain with Israel. There's so much speculation, there's so much misunderstanding, and there's a lot of mischief in the media about all of these issues. And too often Israel is portrayed as the obstinate party. Mm-hmm. When I have talked to the Prime Minister, and I honestly believe that if he is given a chance for real negotiations, and he reached out to Herzog again to join, for the Zionist Union to join, I understand his reluctance, but I think that the Prime Minister is serious if given a chance to come up to have negotiations. The record from all the past negotiations is clear about who walked away from them and who was prepared to negotiate.
Well, do you feel now there is a Palestinian leadership that could, A, speak for the Palestinian people as a whole, and B, is ready to make peace with the Jewish state of Israel?
I do not see anybody right now, because Abbas is not going to yield control. The kleptocracy is too important to him and his kids and the money that they reap from it. At his age, he's not going to do anything bold, though one would think because of his age he would be willing to take risks and try to create a better future for the Palestinian people. Look, we can't declare the chances for peace dead, because that is not in Israel's interest, it's not in the Palestinians' interest, it's not in the region. You see the changes in the region which create a new dynamic. The fact that Sisi is willing to play a role, and the cooperation between Egypt and Israel in the Gaza, in the Sinai, in other areas, and the increasing common interest that they have recognized, the fact that the Saudis had a delegation there, that many other things are taking place which change the regional configuration that Israel finds itself in, and can provide new opportunities that didn't exist before for an agreement, and maybe they can cajole or force the Palestinians into coming to negotiations in a serious way without preconditions, sit down, talk it out, reach an agreement. But you know that people saying two-state solution is dead, and I know you're not, but people who've come on say it. It can come from the left as a statement of you killed the chances for peace, or from the right saying that is never going to happen, we never can live in peace. The answer is that we can. There can be a solution, but you have to have a serious partner for it. Mm-hmm. Until now, it does not exist. We have new partners in the region, not yet matured to the public relationships that we would hope for in the future, but we can never give up on that. And the people of Israel in every poll show that they want it, but it can't be at any price, and it can't be, the kind of demands that we hear so often coming about what we required, how they try to restrict the rights in Jerusalem and elsewhere. That is not going to create the climate for peace.
Malcolm, do you remember what you felt about the Oslo Accords back in the early 90s, 93, 94 specifically? And we just had a conversation with Alan Baker, the former Israeli ambassador to Canada. He was involved in negotiations between Israel and Egypt, Israel and Jordan. He was part of the negotiations in Washington while the Oslo agreements were being hammered out in Norway without his even knowing about it. And what he said to me was, at the time when the Oslo Accords were signed, he was very optimistic. He felt that Arafat and the Palestinians and the PLO wanted peace as much as the Israelis, and that it was only afterward that he began to feel that Arafat was really duplicitous here and had other intentions. I want to know the extent to which in the 90s, during the Oslo process, whether you were optimistic at that point and said to yourself, yes, there is a Palestinian leadership that is ready to live in peace with the state of Israel.
I will tell you something I don't think I've said publicly. Lester Pollock, who was the chairman of the conference, and I were called to come to Israel. We were the first people briefed on Oslo, on the Accords, the morning Peres came back, before any of his staff knew, before the people knew, before the cabinet was notified, we were briefed on it. And we met with Peres for an hour, and then we went to see Prime Minister Rabin. And we sat with him for well over an hour. And Jacques Nerier, who was, had a key position in his office, was a note taker at the meeting and found out about Oslo from listening to the discussion. And he writes that in his book, that he went outside and said, guys, you'll never believe this, and then told them what he had heard at our meeting with the Prime Minister. And I asked the Prime Minister many questions for 45 minutes, really. And he answered with such incredible patience. I asked him why they're giving up this and why they're doing that. And really, because I wanted to understand, and I trusted his judgment. I mean, look at his experience, et cetera. And then in the end, he said, every question you asked me was right. Now let me ask you a question. What's your alternative? And he said to me, we face existential dangers. The Palestinians are not in existential danger. And I think he mentioned Jordan, some others. He said, but Iran and Iraq are. But we can't fight all of them at one time. And therefore, if I can get rid of one of the problems that enables me to focus on Iran and Iraq, then I want to move ahead on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, that is an argument that I think people will understand. Too many of the other things will raise opposition, concerns, questions. And we continued to discuss it for a long time thereafter. And in fact, Mr. Peres left our meeting and flew to Point Mugu to California to meet Secretary Christopher. And the first thing he asked him is, have you met with the American Jewish leaders? And he, of course, told him. And this is also written up in some books about the period. So, of course, I was skeptical. I didn't trust Arafat. I refused to meet him, to shake hands with him, because he had the blood of so many Jews on his hands. And yet we're hopeful. Maybe it's our nature as Jews. We're always hopeful. We grasp at straws. We try to look for some silver lining, though we're always accused of looking for the black cloud. It isn't true. And every prime minister has done this. Netanyahu has done it repeatedly. He doesn't get credit for it, but he has done it.
Mm-hmm.
And how many times has he reiterated his commitment to two-state solution? And then, of course, public officials and countries, including our own, start questioning it and saying he's not really serious, he's not this, he's not that. When I think that we can look at the period and now, in retrospect, make some more clear judgments. One of the things that Oslo made a mistake was they did not take incitement seriously. And Dennis Ross once told me that he acknowledged this, that they didn't take the issue of incitement. And look how the Palestinians continue. How can they talk about wanting peace when they honor, pay tribute, give money, pensions to murderers, and the more you murder, the more you get? The $172 million in their current budget now is allocated to pay the pensions to terrorists. And if they're killed, to their families, they buy them homes. They do so many things, dedicating public parks and sports events in their memory. That is something so fundamental. Israelis do not rejoice in the death of others. Mm-hmm. And when somebody engages in it, you see how the whole country rose to condemn that horrific murder of that young man or other incidents. And yet they glorify the murder. How are you going to have a generation that will be prepared to live in peace and accept the peace if you keep extolling conflict, war, death to your people from the youngest age?
So the question now is, how has it changed for you? If that was the Oslo process and it failed, I understand that you will always be optimistic, Malcolm, but where's the light for you that still gives you hope?
The light in the tunnel could be a train coming at you, as they say. Yes. And the difference between an optimist and a pessimist is the optimist says this is the best of all possible world, and the pessimist agrees. I don't believe this is the best of all possible worlds. Right. When I say I'm an optimist, I think this is something you have to work at. We have to seek out every opportunity to make the situation better, to make sure that Israel is stronger, because only in strength can Israel assure its security. Only when Israel goes into the negotiations in a position of strength and achieves security can it work for them. The Palestinians don't have to worry that Israel is going to come in and massacre them or there'll be terrorism against them. Sure, there are conflicts, people die, but But it's not because Israel wants it. And yet, on the other hand, you have those who are dedicated major forces in the region, including in the PA, that want to see Israel destroyed. So for them, the margin is very small. And therefore, Israel's strength, meaning why do we fight so strongly for the MOU, the Memo of Understanding, to assure that Israel gets the 10 years of military aid? It benefits America, by the way. Not only does it create many tens of thousands of jobs here, because 3/4 and maybe more now, the money is spent here in the United States, and because the technology, et cetera, all comes to the United States' benefit, and our troops benefit from Israel's advances, from avionics, from military, from protection, from in so many areas, and the joint exercises where both countries benefit from each other's experience and technology, et cetera. So I think that the reason for optimism is that the changes in the region, who would have predicted what we are witnessing now? There is no existential danger to Israel today. There is no country, maybe Iran thinks it is, but I don't believe it, could destroy Israel today. Syria is not capable of doing it. They can create problems. There can be changes there that could make the Golan more dangerous, but they're not gonna. They can't destroy Israel. Egypt today is an ally of Israel. Even the Gulf countries, and again, everything can change tomorrow, and there can be any one of these countries can flip the other way, and we can be back to the old days. But for right now, we have seen changes in the region. Israel's isolation is a myth. Look how 50,000 new seats in planes for next year from China, 30,000 from India, Japan, all over Asia reaching out to Israel. Every African leader. Last night I met 5 of them, and they all say, I want to come to Israel. We want the Prime Minister to visit us. We want to have what those 8 countries had when he came last month to Africa. We see significant changes that provide new opportunities and should be seen as symbols of hope that we have to help build on and look for others. We have to work hard to counter the lies and distortions and misrepresentations about Israel. Israel's not perfect. They make mistakes. We can acknowledge people can be critical of a policy of Israel. But what we're seeing is the campaign to deny Israel's existence, the right to exist, and with sectionality and other things, trying to hook in other causes and other other issues against Israel. We have a full agenda, and American Jewry, we are doing a good job. There are many very positive and constructive efforts, but there's so much more that has to be done to protect the Jewish students on campus, to recognize that BDS is a tool, that the cause is anti-Semitism, the cause is the destruction of Israel. That's what's motivating him. BDS is simply a tool, and it is a failed tool. The economic impact of BDS is very minimal. I think it confuses people, and we have to go back to the fundamentals and at the same time engage in positive things, the positive narrative, tell the truth about Israel. That's our strongest weapon. And so we have our frontier, and I'm optimistic because I meet young people now who are so committed, so engaged, so ready to work again. Of course, there are many who are not, but, again, you come back to the silver lining or the black cloud.
Mm-hmm. Malcolm, I love everything you say, and you're my first love, Malcolm. You're doing a fabulous, fabulous job. I always am thrilled when you find time to come on. I just feel you should be on JBS all the time, so I'll continue to chase you. But kol tuv v'hatzlacha, and don't ever get, of all the work you have, somehow you've got to find the energy to keep going. We need you very, very much. But always thank you for giving me so much time of yourself here on JBS. Love you very, very much.
Mutual, and thank you very much.
Be well. The thoughts of Malcolm Hoenlein, Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, doing extraordinary work for the State of Israel and for world Jewry and for us here on the American Jewish scene. As always, my thanks to our Director, Sloan Copeland, Program Coordinator, Serge Goldberg, Editor, Dennis Golan, to JBS's Associate Director, Dara Golub, and to the producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.